Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishnan Nair. Here, basically, we are discussing about the Formula Awards. And in Formula Awards, basically, we have discussed up to 161 part. Right? And in last part, basically, we have discussed the best example of the sales industry and the business development industry. That is basically the how basically the business development industry nowadays are doing the business, and the two example I have already taken. This basically example is example for the each and every sector. Basically, we can say each and every sectors basically contains this example. The example was basically first example was the sales example. How basically the Amazon, Microsoft are basically doing the sales, and in this basically I have taken one example of the capsicum basically how capsicum production is done by the human bodies, and then how the basically the nuclear power companies and energy companies and the energy companies and power companies are taking the data of that generated energies basically. So and this basically the Microsoft Amazon groups basically takes care of this not employees basically the human basically also. So here basically we have discussed one point. This was about the brown capsicum, and the another point was basically example of taken as a mall basically. How the mall industry is working, how the mall industries are getting the stocks from the directly from the in the order of nuclear power companies. So that example also we have taken. So these two are the best example of the sales industry. So now basically we are going to take little bit more examples. For example, I will take one more example. It's also connected with the sales and sales industry only. And before this, basically, I will take one example. One person basically introduced new degree in the market, and the new degree was basically he created around 16 to 17 books, and on the base of that 16 to 70 books, that degree was launched, and the degree name basically was given on the name of his name basically, on the behalf of his name. So this was a private degree, and this was basically getting used by the lots of countries basically. This technique basically was getting used by the lots of countries. So basically the government, what they have done basically, they have collected this 16 to 70 books energies and the main energy of the person, and they constructed the around 20 to 30 buildings, around 40 buildings, assume that 40 buildings, and from that 40 buildings, uh, this entire process basically which 16 to 17 books was created, that entire process was created there within that 40 buildings. And then the building basically was uh, the building was basically created by um, on the base of this person's energy. So whenever basically you are going to think related to this 17 to 16 to 17 books, your body is going to generate some certain energies, and that energy is basically directly coming from that buildings. That is basically 40, 30 to 40 buildings energy, which is created on the base of the 16 to 17 books and the energy of that particular created per book person. This connects where basically this connects like this. Uh, um, I will take one example. I will take one example that is basically about the big colleges like Harvard is there, Oxford is there. I actually applied for Harvard, but basically I had not got the admission because the fees is too high basically for the further study. So basically, further study I was not able to complete, and due to that basically due to basically financial problem basically I was not able to get the admission in Harvard. So I will take example of Harvard and Oxford basically. Um, um, Basically, I don't have Harvard education experience also, and I don't have Oxford education experience also. Then also basically this experience This examples, each and every videos basically is directly connecting to that level of education basically. So we will take one example of Harvard and Oxford and one normal college of the India basically. So assume that college is of Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad. That is basically the normal college you can say. So here basically we will take one example. The example is the Harvard has launched MBA degree. Oxford also launched MBA degree. MS University, that is basically Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad, also launched MBA degree, right? In this, basically, the admission taken in Harvard basically was around 1 lakh people. In Oxford, also 1 lakh people. And in the MS University, also 1 lakh people has taken as an admission. Just taking as an example, in real, basically, this number would be totally different. Just taking it as an example. So now, basically, Harvard education, Oxford education, and the Maharaja Sajirao Gaikwad education. So in Oxford and Harvard, basically the study standard and the money, basically you can say, that is basically known as fees. Uh, that is basically totally high. Totally high means it's very high, more than crore rupees. Basically, you have to spend to just take an exam, complete your MBA in Oxford and in Harvard basically. So just taking it as an example, don't go into number side. Number might be totally different. So and when MS University given the admission, then basically it was around 20 to 30 lakh. So here basically 1 lakh people, total 3 lakh people has done the study, right? Then basically each and every people came for an interview, given an interview, and big MNC companies taken Harvard groups people and Oxford group people. Big MNC company. Just see basically the difference basically, and why this difference is that also I will tell you. Big MNC company has taken this one lakh people, but Maharaja Sayajira Gaikwad people, MBA people, normal MNC company basically has taken hired these people, not big level, and the salary basically offered by Harvard basically and Oxford was more than crore rupees per month, and here basically it was in lakh. So then basically one person asked me basically, that is basically Sunil R. Nair, why is the difference between it's a huge difference, right? Yeah, it's not only huge but it's a very big difference. So why it's difference? What is the difference basically? Why it's so many high? Then basically the Sunil R. Nair basically, that is me, explained this example, that is of books basically. Just now basically I had told you. Same way basically the Harvard books, for example, there are 16 to 15 books of Harvard and 17 to 18 books of Oxford. So there each and every books was basically created by assume four to five authors, and here in Oxford basically 7 to 8 authors. So like this, the Harvard group basically, the Harvard construction industry basically you can say, because Harvard is basically in some certain construction area, right? They are doing the study in some construction area, right? So just see basically how the difference is and why the difference is. So this book basically, and the professor basically, that are 4 to 5 professors, energy was taken, and due from that energy, from that chemical process basically you can say, the energies are equal to chemical process you can say, that energy was taken and it was constructed, sorry, it was collected as a construction material. The chemicals equipment, chemical data was converted to construction materials, and around 70 to 80 buildings was created for Harvard University, and that was in basically assumed that in one New York City. Not only New York City, because Harvard, in Harvard only, not only US people work, European people also uh, do the study. Italian people also do the study. Like this, basically, many people do the study. Basically, you can say, right? So, like this, the education industry was ongoing. The Harvard University, basically, they have taken the education. So like this, from 100 buildings basically, which was created, 70 to 80 buildings they have created from these energies, and this from these blood cells energy of these 4 to 5 professors. So the buildings was created, and whenever basically they were thinking that their 1 lakh people were thinking, because they have taken study of this material, right? So whenever they were thinking, they were getting the energy of these 70 to 80 buildings, and their body was generating very high level of capsicum. Very high level means one capsicum was costing around $100. So just imagine. So that was the cost actually, which they were generating. Their body was generating. So this same way, Oxford University, they basically created 90 to 100 buildings. Same basically as an Harvard basically. And they were generating also capsicum, but their capsicum cost was basically $300. And in MS University, the MS University basically, their books basically has generated some 20 to 30 to 40 buildings, and they were also generating the capsicum, but their capsicum was costing around 35 rupees. So this was the major difference of the study basically, at the energy level, at the power level, and the nuclear plant level. So this was the major difference, and the major basically fees difference between Harvard, Oxford, and MS University. So this is the best example you can say of the education industry. If anybody says that what actually education is, so this example you can give as an example, and this can be used as a case study also in any university. Basically, you can say. So this is the best example of the case study you can say of the education industry. So this all basically the government groups knows, because without government approval it's not possible to create the Harvard University. Without approval of the government, the Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad University is not possible to create. Without approval of government, the Oxford University is not possible to create. So without government approval, this is not possible. So Capsicum basically, which company was generating, that company was basically one of the millionaire company in Harvard and Oxford, and basically in Maharaja Sajira Gaikwad University, one normal Indian company was producing that capsicum. So the 35 rupees, $100 and $300 was the major difference against the body generation of this one lakh people. So just imagine the Harvard University, basically people who are basically studying, who had done the study, they basically mostly do the job in Switzerland, Europe, America, New York, Italy, Ireland, Singapore, Dubai, Sharjah, and then basically there are many countries. Basically, England is there, London is there, so Europe is there. Basically, you can say. So these are the major countries basically where they do the study, and their environment are up to that level. And this 1 lakh people of the Maharaja Sahajirao Gaikwad people, their basically environment study and their education standard and the company basically they offered, that is basically in lakh basically, because the capsicum generation which is generating, that is basically 30 rupees, 35 rupees, and there basically the capsicum price is $100, and Oxford basically it's $300. So this was the major difference in the education sector, and this is the best example of the education sector. Lots of people says that how the education industry is going. So this way the education industry basically nowadays is growing, and in this basically major energy companies are connected directly, and they are doing the business only basically, you can say. So that's why basically somebody has told that nowadays education industry has converted to business. So the energy companies like in India basically Reliance is there, ONGC is there, Ames Oxygen is there, then IPCL is there. There are basically many major companies. Basically, the Tata groups are there. So there are many energy companies basically who are basically directly into the education industry, and they have jumped into education industry as a profit margin. Basically, you can say into as a profit margin, you can say, because nowadays the education has converted. If any person don't have any money, then basically he can't do the education. For example, myself, I don't have money to spend in Harvard University, so I can't do the education. Why? Because I don't have money. So that's why basically the nowadays the education industry has converted to the monetary basically industry, you can say, as a business industry, you can say. So you can just imagine the education industry is the base industry, you can say, of the education is connecting like this. So if base is connected like this, then basically you can just imagine, as the person basically is getting experience, he's going to get experience, he is getting experience, he's earning the money, and the standard of living get increased, and according to his money basically the his body structure get increased, and then basically lots of things happens basically in the body basically, as a process basically, you can say. So I assume that Harvard Education University produce around 1000 human needs in the market. That also very highly costly human needs. Oxford University also produce 1000 human needs in the market, very highly costly materials. MS University also do the same production, but their basically cost of human needs are basically very less. So these all are the basically major difference basically, you can say, in the education industry. So this was about the education industry, and this is basically 162 number part, and in 163 basically we are going to see a little bit more about the formulas, software industry, Bollywood industries, and about little bit more about the Harvard, Oxford, and Maharaja Sahajirao Gaikwad industry, and the major difference between these three.